Hey, this is Black and Gold, Purple and Orange Football Funk on with Mark Rogers, the voice of college football, a good friend, one of the best analysts on what you want to call it, YouTube or whatever. But he's one of the best, and I enjoy talking to him, history and everything. So, Mark, we got something in common. I went to East Carolina, you went to Kent State, but neither one of those are our favorite football teams. So tell me how you became a Ohio State fan.
Well, I grew up in Stowe, Ohio, so that's a little bit outside of Akron, Ohio. And if you don't know where that is, that's about 45 minutes south of Cleveland. So I grew up in the Buckeye State. And if you're going to follow college football in Ohio, then you're probably going to be a Buckeyes fan. There's a few Michigan stragglers around in Notre Dame. Those are probably the second and third teams that have the most fans in Ohio, especially back then. But most are Ohio State fans, of course. And so I just started liking Ohio State football. I watched my first game. My first game I remember was the 76 Michigan game. But really the first season I was pretty locked in on the 77 season, but the 78 season was the first one that I knew everybody, knew what was going on every week, knew when the games were, was totally locked in from 1978 on.
Okay. So outside of James Harrison, can you tell me some more famous players from Kent State?
Oh, yeah. Kent State, if you lined up the Kent State football alumni, you would think that their history would be a lot better than it is because it's pretty awful. The 3 or 4 years I was there, actually, the coach, you would know the coach of Kent State when I was there. The first year was Glenn Mason.
Right.
Who then went to Kansas, then he went to Minnesota.
Right.
And then they
had a heart problem, right? That's why he quit at Minnesota, right?
Yeah. So they might have he's now with the Big Ten Network, but he now they might have won. He went 7-4 his last year at Kent State, and then moved down to Kansas, and they might have won. I think they went like 0-11, 1-10, 1-10 when I was there. They won like 2 games in 3 years. Kent State. So you got Nick Saban,
right?
Lou Holtz,
right?
You got Jack Lambert,
right? Linebacker.
Yeah, you mentioned who did you mention?
James Harrison.
James Harrison, of course, of Steelers fame. Big interception, fumble return. Was that a pick or an interception or a fumble against the Cardinals? Yeah, pick. Yeah. At the end of the first half. That was one of the greatest plays in Super Bowl history. Julian Edelman.
Wow, I didn't know Julian Edelman.
Played some quarterback at Kent State.
Okay.
Josh Cribbs.
Played somewhere. Yeah.
Remember Josh Cribbs?
Yeah, kick return for the Browns.
Yeah, one of the great has all sorts of records. Is one of the top 5 in all the different punt and kickoff return statistical. Antonio Gates.
Yep, basketball player, then turned tight end.
Yeah, should be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame at some point, I would think.
Right.
That's about as far as I can take it. I'm not thinking of anybody else.
Nick Saban, you saying?
Yeah, Nick Saban.
Yeah, that's amazing coaching pedigree. Nick Saban and Luke Holtz. And then if you take it across the way, I think Miami of Ohio has a pretty good lineup of head coaches that came out of there too. So, now I always wondered this. Outside of Michigan, what is the next biggest rival that Ohio State has? Would it be Iowa? I remember Iowa and Ohio State having some pretty good games back in the day. Or Illinois might have been another one. So which one is it?
Well, if you want to go back into history, it would be Illinois. They play for looks like a turtle,
right?
The Illinois.
Right.
So if you're going to talk to an old timer, they're going to bring up the Illinois game. That might be Ohio State's longest series. They might have more games played against Illinois, maybe than anybody but Michigan. Right. I don't remember exactly, but yeah, Illinois. And then, of course, if you're just talking about who's competing for championships, right now it's become Penn State.
Right.
But if you're looking historically, Ohio State doesn't really have any, they are, I would argue, the number 1 program in the conference historically. I think they've surpassed Michigan. So everybody guns for them. But in terms of where where Wisconsin's got a rivalry with Iowa and
Mhm.
also Minnesota, and Michigan does against Ohio State and Michigan State.
And Minnesota too. 'Cause they play for
They
the-
have two rivals. Ohio State, it's pretty much just Michigan.
Right. Right. Yeah, I would wonder that. But give me a famous game outside of the Michigan games and the Rose Bowls against Southern Cal. I mean, those were classics. Everybody knows about them.
Yeah, they haven't gone Ohio State's way very often against USC. So they played 3 straight years in the 70s. So if you take it back, if we go my lifetime, actually the year I was born, USC was number 1, Ohio State number 2, and they played in a great Rose Bowl game with O.J. Simpson.
71?
What's that?
It was 71?
This was in 68, 69 Rose Bowl.
68. Okay.
And USC had won the national championship the year before.
Mhm.
And they were defending champs. OJ was great, obviously, one of the greatest of all time. Ohio State beat USC 27-16 and won the national championship.
Okay.
Then they played 3 straight years in the 70s. Ohio State had a great run where they just kept going to Rose Bowls, were undefeated most of the time.
Mhm.
And they had 3 games against USC that were kind of odd because one of the games, USC blew them out 42-17.
Right.
Lynn Swan, all sorts of great players.
Yeah.
The other game, the last game of the 3, Ohio State blew them out 42-21. The middle game, USC won on a 2-point conversion, 18-17.
Right. Yeah.
And one of the
11-13 against USC, right?
pardon me,
The all-time record is 11-13 against Southern Cal, correct?
11-13. Yeah, I don't know. You're schooling me on that one. I haven't looked that one up or remember that one. But 11-13 actually would sound good to a Buckeyes fan because it doesn't feel like 11-13.
Right.
They beat USC to win a national title in 54.
Right.
But one of the heartbreaking games for me, DeAndre, was the 79 season. Ohio State started. So this was post Woody Hayes punched player on some team down south. I don't remember who that was.
Yeah, Clemson. Yeah.
Yeah, Gator Bowl. I was just explaining that to somebody at work the other day. They couldn't believe that a coach punched a player. I said, didn't hurt him, but yeah, he lifted his helmet, socked him right in the, tried to get him right into the neck there. He's like, seriously? That stuff went on. So the next year, Ohio State was lightly regarded. Earl Bruce wasn't well known. Art Schleicher was in his sophomore season, had a terrible freshman season, threw 21 picks. And they were probably only a top 20 team. And there was only top 20. DeAndre remembers this. There wasn't a top 25 then because they were Ohio State, I think, because they went 7-4-1 the year before. But anyway, they ripped off 11 straight wins, went undefeated, and played a great USC team. Charles White, Anthony Munoz, Ronnie Lott.
Wow.
Dwight Hicks, Eric Wright, Paul McDonald at quarterback, Marcus Allen. Their backfield was Marcus Allen and Charles White.
That was 76.
And 79.
79. Okay.
80 Rose Bowl.
Right.
And Ohio State was up on them 16-10 with just a couple minutes left. And USC went on a drive where they gave Charles White the ball almost every play. And he vaulted over the top from the 1 with just maybe like 40 seconds left. And they lost the national title.
Right. When did they get? Notre Dame or?
Who won the national title?
Yeah, 1979.
So Alabama, a few services gave it to USC, but USC had a tie.
Right.
They had a tie against Stanford.
Oh, okay. So let me ask you this. I was born in 77. So yes, I remember Clemson. Most sports were local back then. So what happened with Ohio State in the 80s? Because I really don't remember Ohio State being great until I started seeing Sean Springs, Pace, and all of them guys. Like, were they down in the 80s? Kind of Michigan State, Iowa, Illinois, and Michigan really dominated the Rose Bowl at the time, especially Michigan. So what was going on with Ohio State those years?
Well, I will say that so Earl Bruce was there from 79 to 87 was his last year. So he almost covered the entire 80s, and he had the best record in the Big Ten.
Right.
So they had the best record in the conference up until 87 for the 80s. But back then, if you tied for a Rose Bowl
Mhm.
in the conference, and if the Big Ten had a rule that if whichever team had not been there as recently got to go to the Rose Bowl. So they missed out on 1, 2, 3 Rose Bowls because they tied somebody who hadn't been there in a long time.
I know Illinois was one of them because we talked.
Yeah. And Iowa.
Yeah, Iowa.
But
That Long, right?
Chuck, actually, the Iowa team that I'm talking about was pre-Chuck Long. But yeah, Chuck Long was there in 80. 3, 4, 5, 6, yeah, in that range. They had a decent run. They weren't competing for national titles. They would always, they had a lot of 9 and 3 years. They were always around 8th in the polls, 10th, 12th, throughout most of the 80s. But then Earl Bruce's last year, he got fired because he went 6-4-1.
Cooper was next after him,
and so Cooper came in, and they were down his first. 88, 90, 91, even 92 was okay. They were okay. They went 9-2-1, or 8-3-1. But their first 3 years under Cooper were pretty bad. And so, yeah, they weren't. In 86, they won the Cotton Bowl, finished in the top 10, finished number 6. And they lost on a last second field goal to Michigan. They tied for the Big Ten title, went to the Cotton Bowl and won. And that was the last really good team they had. Then in 87, 8, 9, 90, 91, and 2. They weren't really a national power, even though they still should have went to the Rose Bowl in 90. They got stopped on 4th and inches, or they would have went to the Rose Bowl in 90. They almost beat Michigan to win the Big Ten and go to the Rose Bowl in 89. So they still were decent most of those years, but not as good as they would be.
And the teams that I remember from Michigan, of course, Eddie George, Robert Smith, Sean Springs, Orlando Pace. Hoyer was a quarterback, I believe.
Sure.
Yeah. So I know you were getting on NC State's football program, and I saw something interesting. NC State got more quarterbacks in the league than Ohio State has.
Oh, I bet they do.
Yeah, like even since I'm not gonna say maybe since what? When did Eric Kramer come out of NC State? 87 maybe?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, I'm like, yeah, that's very interesting. So who's the best player in Ohio State outside of Archie Griffin? Because everybody go to Archie. I ain't never seen him play. So a lot of people go to Archie Griffin. I'm
not going to Archie, even if you include Archie. And I have great respect for the man. I've met him twice.
Right.
Signed a book for me one time, and then by coincidence, it was strange that just about 5 or 6 years after that, I was a sportscaster in Mississippi, and Archie Griffin was in town for the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, which I was asked to host the banquet, and Archie Griffin was the guest speaker. So it hit me that afternoon to ask somebody and pull some strings and get Archie Griffin to come on my sportscast that night. Right. So I didn't talk any real sports news that night. I sat in the newsroom and talked to Archie Griffin for my sportscast. So I'm indebted to Archie Griffin. He's a great guy. He did some nice things for me. But people would be surprised to know this. In one of the 2 years that Archie Griffin won the Heisman Trophy, guess how many touchdowns he scored?
10. 10. 4? 4. Wow. I know you told me one time had a running back that was just as good as he was.
Do you remember Pete Johnson?
Yeah.
Okay, Pete Johnson. Pete Johnson on the same team scored 25.
Wow.
Now the first thing you would think of, okay, if anybody knows anything about Pete Johnson, he was a big, huge fullback, would plow in from the 1, and you would think, well, he scored all the touchdowns from the 1 and the 2 yard line. And that was partially true, but Pete Johnson still ran for 1,100 yards that year.
Wow.
And I ran for 1,550, 1,650 and 4 touchdowns and won the trophy. Man, the best player in history. See, I don't think it's necessarily, I think that's a great question. I don't know that it's necessarily Archie Griffin.
I'll go with Orlando Pace, but
it might be. It might be.
When people look at football, they always go to the quarterback. I mean, Smith was good, Fields is good, but I always look at people like Orlando Pace and how he transcended
Sure.
to the pros. So I always go with people like that. So I like Orlando Pace, Eddie George. I mean, we have a good offensive line. You can do anything. But one game I always remember, the Arizona State Ohio State game with Jake Plummer at Arizona State. That was a great game between the two, man.
Sure.
I really enjoyed it, man. It So I'm gonna move to some ACC talk now.
Okay.
What were your impressions? I know it's been 2 weeks of Florida State and Georgia Tech. What were your impressions of that game?
Well, Florida State was dominant in the first quarter.
Right.
Like they were going to run away with it. They should have had more than a 10-0 lead. If you're going to make a direct comparison between James Blackman and Jeff Sims, and consider that Sims is making his first start as a true freshman.
Right.
Blackman's been on campus for 4 years, and I know the offensive line's not good, but wow, it almost looked like their roles were reversed. Like Sims made 2 really bad plays with those 2 picks in the first half, but then after that, played really well.
Right.
Man, they're just, for all this talent they've recruited, I don't really see it.
Well, and people got on me for, I don't want to make it about race, but like these are still the players that Jimbo Fisher recruited. And I thought Willie Taggart should got a longer chance because to let him get his players in there. Now I know everybody said, well, look how he couldn't get the special teams on the field. They played terrible against Clemson and stuff like that. But maybe Jimbo Fisher's style was built for a certain style of offense that, I formation type and not really for a spread. So maybe that's why the transition took so long. But you got to give a quarterback, you got to give a coach more than 4 or 5 years. More than 3, a year and a half to put his own people in there.
Yeah, that's very true. And I've been critical of Willie Taggart, but still a year and whatever it was, 9 games isn't a whole lot.
Right. And these are guys that Jimbo Fisher recruited. How do you feel about people comparing Sims to Vince Young? Is it just the size or is there something else that you see? At least down here in ACC country, they are.
I would say he's got better throwing mechanics than Vince Young did at the same stage. I don't know if he's got the arm strength, but I really guess I hadn't heard that, so I wasn't looking at him in that way to see the dynamic running ability. He's built similarly. I don't think he's quite as thick, but then again, he's only a freshman.
Right.
But Florida State, I think they're good defensively.
Yeah, they had 10 starters back.
Yeah, the defense is pretty good. Their secondary didn't play well last year. But the offense, it's not just the offensive line. We talk about how bad the offensive line is, and that's usually the root of any team that's got offensive issues, but they don't really have a dynamic running back. Laburn was a guy that, of course, came on campus as a 5-star that they hoped would turn out, and then he did whatever he did. I don't remember, to get him kicked off the team.
That's a guy that transferred from Texas A&M.
Jayshon.
Laburn. Yeah.
Yeah, Corbin. And Tamarian Terry, I think, is a really good wide receiver who we're going to see play in the NFL. But besides him, these other receivers didn't play well against. That was my big question for my Florida State guys, was who are going to be the 2, 3, and 4 receivers, because I don't see anybody that's really that good.
That goes to my next question. Do you think Florida State would ever come back? Because what I realized when I was coming up in the 90s, just like you didn't have Central Florida, you didn't have South Florida, you didn't have Florida International, you didn't have Florida Atlantic. And then also, like Dunn and Vanover, they were from Louisiana. And when Nick Saban came in there, he kept that talent in Louisiana. So will we ever see Florida State back where it used to be?
Well, that's a good point that you make about Louisiana talent, because that's why LSU wasn't. If anybody wants to look at college football history, and they might be surprised that LSU, between the time that I started watching and the time Nick Saban showed up, wasn't a good program.
No.
They had some good years here and there, but
Yeah.
I was looking at it a couple of months ago for a video, and they had a stretch of time where they won like 41% of their SEC games for like 11 years.
Wow.
In from like 88 and 2000, something in that range. But anyway, back to Florida State. So you're right. So Florida State can't go there and consistently grab talent.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's so many players in Florida. They shouldn't be competing with all the schools that you just mentioned. There's only 2 schools that they should be competing with in state to get the kind of players we're talking about.
But then at the same time, you gotta look. You got Nebraska going in there. You got Clemson going in there. I was shocked. Top billing, he pointed out that Georgia goes into Florida and gets a lot of Florida players. So they're not just Ohio State, another school. And they got a lot of people plucking away at the talent there. And I don't know. I don't know if we'll ever see what they did in the 90s again with them. And it's not a knock at Florida State because they're a very good program, and historically, they have some great players. That 88 game still stuck in my head with Florida State and Clemson, and Deion waving to the crowd as he goes score a touchdown on a punt. So to Georgia Tech though, what do you think that they are they on the way? I mean, I know they got beat really, really bad by Central Florida, but do you see them coming up?
I don't really think it's much of an embarrassment of how they performed. That's about what I expected. Mm-hmm. It was fairly competitive for the first 2.5 quarters or so. They just blow so many assignments on defense, and they don't have the kind of pass rushers to deal with that kind of offense. Mm-hmm. So that's their big issue. But the way Jeff Collins talks, it sounds like he figures there's as many players in this metro area than just about anywhere in the country that are eventually going to play in the NFL. So why don't we get our share?
Academic.
Made a comment about how many schools within a 5-hour distance have won the national championship in the last 10 or 15 years.
Right.
Auburn, Alabama, Clemson, and whoever else. But so he's talking like he thinks they can be a serious contender.
I think they could. I just think because of their academic structure, and the one that won in '91 is totally different than what they are possibly capable of doing today. But I like what they're doing. And we talked about it. Now, the joke around my friends at East Carolina and myself, will Central Florida score 70 points on East Carolina this weekend?
If they really want to. Sometimes when there's a big mismatch, DeAndre, like Ohio State's playing Rutgers, let's say, the score could be anything.
Right.
If it's 42-7 at the end of the game, that it's just 42-7 because Ohio State just put it on cruise control. I would love to know that if in a situation like that, or Clemson and the Citadel this past weekend, it's 49-0. What could it be though? If you went to every Clemson player and said, we're going to give you an incentive for every point that you score, or you get a bonus if you shut them out. I would just love to see if they had incentive to destroy them, what some of these mismatches really could look like.
Right. Well, what do you think about Miami this weekend in Louisville? I mean, I picked Louisville to win the game, and I ain't no need to lie about it. I did. And I thought Louisville would come out and play better, but their defense hasn't improved that much compared to last year.
Yeah. So I'm kicking myself for picking Louisville, but I did as well. Because when I really look at it, I thought, okay, Louisville's got what could be an elite offense. Could be.
Right.
But now we know that their offensive line, and I kind of suspected this, might not be that great.
Right.
They lost Mekhi Becton, one of the best left tackles in football.
6'8", 320.
What's that?
6'8", 320, boy. That's a big boy.
Yeah. So they showed that. But I like Malik Cunningham. I like their receivers, especially, of course, Tutu Atwell. He's got to be used certain ways. And Javian Hawkins is impressive. So anyway, I thought, if Louisville has an offense that you would rate like an 8, 8.5 on a scale of 1 to 10, Miami's has just as good of players, but I didn't think that they would be in sync yet. Those Louisville players had all played together under Cunningham. And so Miami was more of a wild card on offense. But Miami's defense is considerably better than Louisville's. So that's why I was kicking myself thinking Miami's got just as much speed and talent on offense. And De'Ara King's just as good, if not better, than Malik Cunningham. I think he's changed the pronunciation of his name. And then Miami's got this defense that's one of the best in the ACC. If not, I don't know if they're one of the best in the country, but they're a top 10 to 15 defense. So why in the world did I pick Louisville? But I did. I did too. I just thought Satterfield's doing a nice job. And again, that cohesiveness of playing together and being at home. So I talked after the game, did a live stream, and of course, Miami fans were just through the roof, going crazy, which I said, you've got every right to. It's a big win. It's actually the biggest win of the college football season so far. But let's calm down. It's Louisville. You didn't just beat, I won't even go to Clemson standards. You didn't just beat Notre Dame. You didn't just beat Penn State. You didn't beat somebody like that.
And you still gave 27 points to them. Was it 47-27?
34.
34?
47-34.
And so that means you got Clemson in 2 weeks, and you just gave up all these points to a Louisville team, and Clemson has a better defense.
It's a good win. And they didn't squeak out a win. And I think that Miami could be happy with going in there and winning 31-28 against a team that was a slight favorite and going home with a win. But they went in there and they were definitely the better team. It wasn't close.
Right. So I meant to ask you about it. I know Shaun Wade opted back in. So who else does Ohio State have on their defense? That was part of my Ohio State question I'm going to ask you about. Who else is on their defense? Going to return 3 starters off their defense?
3 starters coming back. Malik Harrison and is their best linebacker. At least they're most of those starters coming back are their linebackers. Tuff Borland, Pete Werner, Malik Harrison, Tyreek Smith's up and coming defensive end. Jonathan Cooper is a guy to look out for as well. On the defensive front, I haven't even really looked at the Buckeyes, to tell you the truth. But I've been prepping all these other teams. But, yeah, they did lose a lot on defense. They did lose a lot on defense, and most of that in the secondary. And Shaun Wade's backup, who replaced him in the playoff game, actually had some serious allegations against him, and he left school.
Right. Well, yeah, I meant to ask you about that because no offense, Ohio State's going to be fine. Justin Fields is a beast. I'm hating that we didn't get that Ohio State-Oregon game, man. I wish there was a way they can squeeze that in, but I think a lot of Oregon players has opted out too anyway, even if they did have a season. So, Wake Forest, NC State. Did you happen to see that game? That's another one that killed me.
Well, it killed me too.
Yeah.
Killed me too.
I'm going with the over.
Well, I was going with Wake with the point or 2.
Right.
They lost by 3. So I liked Wake. So I got off to a great start on Saturday. Then I missed the 2 late games, so I went 5-2 against the spread. But I didn't watch the game because I was watching the Louisville-Miami game. I don't get the ACC network, and I was wishing that I did because, sometime in the third quarter, I was thinking, look at this Wake NC State game. Looks like a really good game. But I watched the replay. I watched the cut-down version, and it was entertaining. It's a good game.
I was shocked how many points they gave up Wake Forest because their defensive line is really, really good.
Wake Forest defensive line.
Yeah, they go 10 deep. Yeah, so I thought they were going to be good. Number 9 for Wake Forest. He's potentially a top NFL pick in the top 32. So I was looking at him. I was kind of shocked because Clemson didn't move the ball well on. I know Dabo said because of the second team offensive line didn't play well, but I was real shocked at that game. I mean, I don't think NC State hasn't beat them in 3 years. So, but yeah, I was shocked at that game. So what's your impressions of Clemson so far? All right.
Well, my impressions are that they're one of the 3 best teams in the country.
Okay.
I saw the Wake. Well, how much did I see against Wake Forest? I saw maybe a half.
That's only half you need to see.
I think that's, people dismiss Wake Forest, but they're winning 7-8 games a year. And if Clemson's able to do that to them, and don't look at the final score, anybody who didn't watch the game, the final score meant nothing. Clemson could have won that game 50-0.
Right.
Completely annihilated them.
Do you like the hype on Breeze so far? The defensive tackle, number 11 for Clemson?
Well, I hear great things about him. I want to see him play a quality opponent, but
are you going to get that out of the ACC this year? Because you got Virginia next week, and then you got Miami, who I still don't – I watched a UNAB game, and I still have concerns about their offensive line. Plus, when we're going to go through it, I don't know what the deal is with Foster for Clemson along the defensive line, but when you got that type of talent rotating 8 and 9 people out, even if you're going fast, your offensive line gonna get wore out too, especially if you don't have to blitz. So I'm kind of interested in seeing that game. What does worry me, I was waiting to see Boot play. He did get beat in that Wake Forest game a few times. I don't know if you happen to see that. That's somebody I was waiting to see play because he had a lot of hype coming into college. So, man, I couldn't wait to see that play. So, yeah, man, but, man, I'm just glad to have football back more. I'm glad the SEC going to get played. When does the Big Ten start?
October 24th.
What else you looking forward to outside the Big Ten, outside Ohio State? Who are the teams you'll be looking at?
Well, I kind of thought the 2 intriguing teams for me coming into the season were North Carolina and Tennessee.
Right.
Not that I'm picking them to do big things, especially not Tennessee, but I just think that they're intriguing because they've got some pieces in place and they're on the rise. Mm-hmm. I picked, and I actually didn't take the time to figure out who would win this scenario, but I picked Notre Dame, North Carolina, and Virginia Tech to tie for second place in the ACC. So I don't know how they're going to sort that out. That would be, if that happened, I guess, common opponents.
No, they go by the highest ranked team, I believe.
The highest ranked?
Yeah. And within the only reason why I know that, or I'm thinking that's how they're going to do it, because in the Coastal, that's how, when they were divisions, that's how it went. That they had the same amount of games and they lost the same. They go to who's ranked higher.
I thought that went to common opponents. I thought that was coming down. I was looking at that in the Coastal Division last year when it looked like it might be a tie. It would go to common opponents before it would go. How do you even rank those teams if they all played ACC games and they didn't play anybody else?
Well, they go through what's it called, the poll or whatever. What's that thing called that they use to decide the national champion? The selection committee poll. That's what I remember. I could be wrong. I don't know, but that's what I heard.
That would seem foolish to me to do it that way.
Well, my question was, go ahead.
Well, I still wouldn't agree with it, but I would understand it if there were significant non-conference games to point to, because Virginia Tech was supposed to play Penn State. Mm-hmm. Well, Notre Dame wasn't even going to be part of the deal, and North Carolina was going to play Auburn and UCF. So you'd be able to say, okay, they all went 6-2 in the ACC, but they played non-conference games that we can compare and separate them. But they're not playing non-conference games, so that 9-2 is going to be 8-2. So I'm picking all three to go 9-2. If they all go 8-2 in the ACC, and they beat up, somebody outside of conference that doesn't really matter, like Notre Dame just did against South Florida, then I don't know how you separate them.
Doesn't Notre Dame and Carolina play this year?
Yeah.
Yeah. Notre Dame seemed like their schedule got harder when they joined the ACC. I ain't trying to be funny, but I think they play Miami, Carolina, and Clemson this coming up here, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't think Notre Dame's got Miami.
They don't got Miami?
No.
Oh, okay. Big my imagination on that one. Yeah. Can you imagine Clemson being undefeated and had to go to Virginia Tech, and they finally let crowds back in of 55,000 and playing in that cold in the mountains and hear Metallica Sandman come down? Well, that would be so interesting for that game if Virginia Tech can never get started, because Virginia Tech has a bye before that game. So, but we were talking about Duke and Boston College. You say I always pick Duke for some reason. I mean, I just think Cutcliffe will come up with something, but
yeah.
I don't know how Duke playing already and Boston College not playing a game. I don't know how those factors work, because maybe Boston College got a little bit more to see on tape than Duke had. But, I mean, Duke turned it over, twice in the red zone, so that hurt them too. So, I mean, even if they would have scored, I think they would still lost a game 20-26. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't see any of the game. I do want to see this Boston College quarterback transfer from Notre Dame, Jerkovich, see how well he can play.
Oh, wow. Going back to the ACC, because that's all I really, really follow, Syracuse, man. I don't know why the coach up there, Dino Babers, won't bench DeVito. I don't know, because their names sound similar, but Culpepper looked like he was a better quarterback in that game, man. He scored the only touchdown for him.
Well, I was going to say he looked like the better quarterback based on one play.
Right.
He had a big touchdown pass, which needs to be factored in. DeVito got sacked 7 times, I think, in both games already this year.
Man, maybe it's the offensive line, but what I've seen out of the man the last couple of years, he looks absolutely terrible. I know Syracuse is putting a fullback on the offensive line to try to help block.
Yeah.
But I don't know. But it just seems like Dino Babers is going to lose his job after this year. I mean, I don't know where Syracuse can go from there, but I heard the facilities are not that great at Syracuse.
No, the facilities aren't great, and he's up in upstate New York.
Right.
It's going to be tough to get players to come up there.
Well, remember the time you couldn't even say that about Syracuse? I mean, I don't know what it is. I mean, they used to go get players out of Rhode Island, Connecticut, because what's the defense in Freely's from that area?
Yeah.
Marvin Harris out of Philadelphia. I mean, they used to get talent. I don't know what happened to Syracuse. I don't know. Could they join the ACC? I don't know what happened.
Yeah, once about 2000 hit, it's been a rough ride ever since. Doug Marrone had a decent year or two, but nothing close to what they were doing in the most of the 90s with Pasqualoni and McPherson before him. Yeah.
I mean, Donovan McNabb. I mean, I just can't figure it out what happened to those to that school, man. They used to be great. I mean, I love watching Syracuse play. Sometimes they run a wishbone. Sometimes they go 3 wide.
Yeah.
So, I mean, those games against Florida State, and like in the 90s, early 90s used to be pretty good. I mean, that I remember.
Oh, absolutely. They were good in that that time frame. They beat Ohio State in the Hall of Fame Bowl.
Yeah, they crushed Clemson, 44-0 one year. I mean, they had some teams, man.
Yeah.
I mean, hey, hey, it is what it is. I mean, they had some good teams. I remember in the 80s they had some good teams. Didn't they finish like second or third in the nation in like 88 or 87, somewhere around
Yeah,
there?
87 they tied Auburn in the Sugar Bowl.
Wow. Yeah, man. I just don't get it. Pitt is another one. I mean, Pitt. I tell people, I got a Michigan fan mad at me. I said Pitt has been more relevant since 1948 than Michigan has.
Well, you got a argument there.
I mean, Hugh Green, Dan Marino, I mean, Curtis Martin, Tony Dorsett, Darrell Reeves. I mean,
Yep.
I can't name on my lifetime on this earth. I don't think Michigan's had better talent than Pitt has.
Well, they've not had better stars than Pitt has. I don't know if they haven't had better talent overall. They've been better most of that time.
I mean, some of those schools, I wish they can get it back together. I went up to Pitt maybe last year for the Virginia game, and they couldn't. I seen their facilities is not very good outside of what Larry Fitzgerald built for them. But but Mark, man, I really appreciate you coming up here with me, man.
Absolutely.
You know, whatever the thing is going on, one day you get it solved, and we'll be able to listen to you. Cause I don't have nobody to tune in to late night to say, "Yo, what's going on?" And look at this score. Did you see this over here?
Know it.
See that over there? I mean, man, I don't understand. I told Bobby and Pete this, man. I mean, I want to vote all of them out, those fools out of office because they maybe miss college football. We only get 6 to 7 months of it, man, and they took it from us.
Yeah.
But man,
DeAndre.
I mean, man, it hurts my heart, man. It really does. I mean, now the fans don't really mean much being in the stadium, but I just miss seeing all the people crowded together, screaming and yelling. I always go to a game when Clemson comes up here to North Carolina. I always go to either the state game or the Wake Forest game. I can't do that this year, but
it'll come back.
Yeah, hopefully, until they take a virus shot, and we don't know the work yet. So, hey, it might take us all out, man. I don't know, but hopefully it does. Oh man, let me ask you.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen a triple option team come back like Navy did?
Well, they came back big. Yeah, sure they did. And they a little bit downfield too. Yep.
Yeah, you got to like that quarterback. But all right, Mark, man, thank you for coming up here talking to me, man. I really appreciate it. Hopefully,
appreciate the invite, DeAndre.
Man. Well, I hope you do it again. And you're the best in the business, man.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that, and thank you so much for your support for years now. And you're the one guy that I can count on to support and encourage, and also call me up and start talking 1980s football. So it's always fun.
Wasn't that when it was the best? I mean, I love the day, but you don't got players sitting out the bowl games, no matter how irrelevant the game is. I mean, I miss them days, the triple option teams coming around the corner. I love the day game too, the spread and stuff, but you had so much variety. Florida throwing the ball down the field, Florida State, the fast pace. I'm like, oh man, you gotta love it back then, man. But all right, Mark, man, you take it easy, my brother.
All right, DeAndre, have a good one.
You too, sir.
Take care.
All right, bye.